CMMS Radio talks about all things CMMS, computerized maintenance management software, focused on maintenance management. It's the people, the process, and the culture that make your CMMS journey a success. All right, welcome back to CMMS Radio. We are joined by the one and only Dan Anderson. I say Dan the Man Anderson. He's with ReliabilityX. We just spent some cool time together out in Greenville, South Carolina. We were at the Streamline Asset Management User Conference, hanging out all week. That was to wrap up and end February. And, Dan, you also joined me for a really cool on-site. We don't want to talk about that too much, but it was cool to kind of hang out, collaborate, get a feel for what a big, awesome operation looks like, how it just continually improves. But one thing I want to hit you with right out of the gate, man, I did a post recently, and it was called Embrace the Fakeness. And it was about a lot of the nonsense that happens throughout the industry. And I didn't want it to come off like I was calling everybody out hard, but at the same time, I want people to notice that there's a lot of shenanigans out here. AI that doesn't do much, sensors that are just everywhere and don't do much, CMMS companies, EAM companies that may or may not do a great job of understanding clients. So I want to ask you straight and away, is there any kind of fakeness out there that you want people to be aware of? How can they vet it more properly? And what's the reality? How can people improve? All that good stuff. What you got?
Greg, that's a good kickoff right there. You are 100% right. I mean, there is a lot of fakeness out there. I'd like to think of it sometimes too, Greg, like the buzzwords. Those buzzwords you hear all the time.
Yeah.
Those things are yeah, that's what I would be careful of, and I'm sure that anybody who's listening to this right now understands that when you start hearing things that don't sound 100% legit and are genuine, and you're not asking for facts to back up these, that a lot of times you can go down that rabbit hole. And what the way I foresee it and is putting your money where your mouth is at the end of the day. What's a return on investment for some of this work that's being done out there? Is it really increasing my production capacity? Is it improving my efficiencies on a production line? Or am I just focusing in on asset related reliability? And so I would really warn folks that when you're looking at things and you start hearing like just these buzzwords that are ridden throughout the industry, that you stop for a second and think to yourself, well, how is that going to impact my business? Because this is what we're here at the end of the day, especially with manufacturing organizations, is improving that efficiency on a production line. And then maybe if you're in a utility or, a type of industry that's not cranking out widgets, so you're thinking about the efficiencies of the asset, but how is it helping the business? And how is it helping me to achieve business results at the end of the day?
Yeah, I love that. And, you've been around. We traded a lot of cool stories, many of which, won't quite yet make it onto the podcast. But what we talked about was all this kind of industry retrospect, where we've been. We've all been in different kind of parts of the US or the world, working with people, using software to help improve what they already, we hope, would be to improve what they might have as what is an effective process, and how can we improve that even more? How can we start documenting it and seeing a little bit more about what's happening? So I think when you give these insights, I want people to understand there's a lot to the credibility that I see, and a lot of it's based on things we've talked about throughout that week. So with these buzzwords, I think the buzzwords play a role from a, hey, let's get your attention. Hey, this is possible. And I kind of like that stuff. What
Mm-hmm.
I'm far more interested in typically is getting into the people and the process and what really works. And a lot of that is going to boil down to the basics, the basic fundamentals. So when you are working with someone, whether they reach out to you with a problem, hey, we think we need some help, or we definitely need some help, or when you're in a conversation and you hear something, with someone when you're on the front lines there at ReliabilityX, are there typical things that you are looking for that give you a clue as to the problem they might have that you can solve?
Yeah. I think, a lot of times as you go into these manufacturing organizations, if you hear somebody who says, first and foremost, I'm working a lot of overtime on the weekends, they're either doing that because they enjoy the extra pay, but I think a lot of folks would rather be at home with their families, not having to worry about their plant manager calling them up about a critical breakdown at the plant, that they have to run in on a Saturday or even a Sunday to address that, right? Not having spare parts or expediting too much spare parts. I remember at one point in time, when I was working in manufacturing, I worked for a German automotive company up in the Greenville, Spartanburg area. And we had to order our spare parts from Germany, which had a relatively long lead time. So if we had a critical breakdown situation, I was expediting these parts for ridiculous amounts of money. So, take into consideration all those variables, like in just, even walking out there and people pencil whipping work order. Pencil whipping meaning that, hey, yeah, these are all, check belt, check bearing, whatever, I'm just going through here because the man's telling me I need to get this work order or PM done and hand it back in. So those are kind of some things that you'd hear from folks on the shop floor when you go in there. One of the things I like to come back to too, Greg, because you're intimately familiar with this, is just the whole CMMS versus the reliability community.
Mm.
And, I've kind of danced between the two throughout my career. Right out of college, I was fortunate enough to start with a company data stream, which gave me a lot of exposure to, manufacturing environments, everything from pharmaceuticals to automotive to food production, all in those areas in between. And as I would come in and I'd help these folks with their systems, I'd realize, there was a lot of frustration there from people that had, just really dumped gobs and gobs of money into their software product, expecting it to work wonders for them.
Hmm.
And I quote Ron Moore a good bit because I've kind of stepped back and forth. And Ron Moore is, just a guy I've been very fortunate to learn from throughout the years. And he once told me, buying a new shiny CMMS program and expecting it to work wonders for you is like buying Microsoft Word and expecting it to have a novel written for you, right?
Hmm.
It just doesn't happen without the hard work and focusing in on the processes that supply that tool with the reports and the different information you're getting out of it. So a lot of times if you go into an organization and you ask about their software package and they say, oh, it's great, it's given us all the reports we need. And so I think that's almost an indicator as well too, Greg, that they have their processes down pretty well, that the tool is actually providing them the information they want. It all goes back, and I hate to pull it out since we talked about buzzwords, whole garbage in, garbage out, right? But it's true. There's a lot to that buzzword in particular, right?
That's actually a really valid and strong point you make, kind of about how some of the buzzwords, they're not as buzzy as what you think, and the more we use them, the more noise they create, and people kind of tune out to what that is, and we're going to hear it forever. Garbage in, garbage out. And
Yep.
essentially the way that works is, regardless of the software you use, regardless of even the processes that you're trying to follow, if you're not doing it, I want to say right. And what I mean by that is valid, contextual, consistent information about what you really did, what you're really about to do, what actually happened. That's where it all starts. And when you talk about that, and what I'm saying is, I don't care what software you use, really. My favorite CMMS on the planet's not mine anymore, so I don't have a favorite anymore, right? And
Yeah.
I always believed, always, and I still do, that as great as the technology can be, as awesome as the reports and the KPIs and the things we're striving for to keep us really on track and accountable and past, present, and future view, all good, right? But I roll it all the way back to what did we do when we didn't have software? We developed a strong culture. We knew exactly what we did, why we did it, who we did that for, and then how we kept ourselves accountable. Then we started documenting that in some way, kind of like a piece of paper or something like that. And then at some point, and I'm leaving out kind of the card punch systems and all that, but at some point, like in the 90s, late 90s, people said, well, how can we web enable that? That's the way I always looked at it. Take what you already do really, really well and web enable it. Or nowadays, a little buzzy, maybe a lot, digitize it. Do some digital transformation as if
Yeah.
you're transforming from, you know, archaic methods, the paper and the pen and the voicemails and all that, to let's get a piece of software that can see, track, and manage all that stuff.
Yep.
All sounds great, but that promise, you're talking about Ron Moore, that promise of what it's going to do for you, it's not set it and forget it. You're going to have to do the work. And on top of that, once you find success, again, based on a strong culture of maintenance excellence, and maybe the software can help tweak and fix a little bit of that, some of your blind spots, find you some clues to work on, you have to maintain that as well. And it's kind of always at risk of becoming shelfware. We talked about that. People with these big, bad, awesome systems, if you know what you're doing with it, has to have frontline worker involvement for sure. Otherwise, you're cooked. But how does that shelfware outcome, in your view, in your experience, and what you've seen, how does that really happen? What happens when they go from acquiring a solution, deploying it, to maybe even adopting it, to then starting to let go? What do you think?
Well, I think it's all about expectations. And as you had mentioned there too, Greg, the culture within an organization. So if you're and let's put them into the four buckets really. You've got reactive, proactive, emerging, and world class, right? And so if I walk into an organization, they're either set in one of these areas. Like a world class one, you can walk in immediately. The floors are impeccable, well painted. People are actually hustling. You can see them actually working. Versus a reactive organization. Oh gosh, I've been in a couple of reactive organizations where it's like safety's really bad. The machines aren't taken care of. There's lubrication flying around everywhere. Heck, I've even been into some sites where there's operators smoking cigarettes and, no safety glasses or PPE on. So you can see it as soon as you walk into a plant where they stand. Sometimes in the middle phases, it's a little bit more difficult, but a reactive environment versus a world class environment is totally different, right? And I say all that to set the stage of, if you are taking a system or some type of technology and putting it in there, let's say your leadership has set the expectation that we need a predictive maintenance program, or we need to get a CMMS program in place, or we need to focus in on sensor technology or any of these things. And you're caught still in the reactive environment, not doing the right stuff. You have a long way to go until you get to some more of these predictive technologies. Either that, or you're just going to sit there and collect data without using it for any meaningful results, right? At the end of the day.
Yeah.
So I would really kind of look at an organization and see if they fall within a reactive or a proactive environment. If they are in a proactive environment and they're coming to me about some uh, APM technologies, asset performance management technologies, which is the more proactive side of things, capturing that sensor data to go out and predict a failure before it happens. But if you're not even crafting good PMs to go out and address these pieces of equipment, you don't even need to be thinking in terms of predictive. You need to think in terms of setting a foundation. And like you had mentioned, Greg, getting a good foundation in there of good equipment numbers, of getting your inventory accurate, getting some nice, well thought out PM tasks, on the front end before even diving into that second phase, which is the more proactive side. Same thing comes with positions. Like, does that reactive environment, when they're implementing reliability engineering or planning and scheduling, are they ready for that? And
Mm.
are they ready to compare themselves to best practices? Or are they still kind of caught to, okay, well, maybe we start off with somebody who serves dual roles until we know we've gotten to the point to where we're at, and then take that next step to move towards a more advanced technology that's out there.
I love that because these are some of the gaps that we may or may not see, depending on where we sit in this overall equation at the organization. Which part of the team are we on? Do we work over here, over there? Do we sit behind a desk? Are we watching all the money and we don't have complete visibility, relying on KPIs? Or we're in there looking for opportunities to help somebody, not to just sell what we do, but to actually find a problem that we understand its root cause, whether it's the asset itself, the line itself, or actually something much bigger for the organization. That's that kind of opportunity to look for these clues. For me, it was always the idea that I want to know what somebody does or doesn't know about their own operation. And if I see gaps where they have blind spots, that's where I typically would go in to see if there was a magnitude to that problem or an opportunity, a business opportunity to improve through tracking data, scheduling things in a more appropriate way that meets the need of what the environment is. But if it's already a mess, you have to be really careful with that. I think what you're really talking about is even if you had a challenging culture or a lot of infighting, blame game, firefighting constantly, and you bring someone in as maybe even a change agent. Ooh, I'm an agent of change, right?
Ooh,
Ooh,
change agent, yeah.
ominous.
Yeah.
They're gonna have their work cut out for them. And if they start making changes just lickety split, I mean, those are gonna lack context. And this is why this kind of cycle tends to repeat itself. And I think the ones that hit that pinnacle you talked about, I think they've just become so good at what they do on the basic fundamentals that they've now created the opportunity to look for anomalies and attack them quickly. If you're going after anomalies without that base of general solid fundamental excellence, so to speak, right? I mean, it's a big, lofty kind of thing. Now you're not focused on what you need to do first, and you squirrel, squirrel, squirrel. And I think it kind of works like that. I like weaving it into a story like that because I don't think this stuff is really complicated. I think that it's disruptive to fix it. But if you fix it and you find it and you fix it and you get confirmation ahead of time that, yeah, what we're about to do, what we're about to invest in and our people and our organization, our process and our technology, that's actually going to get us somewhere and we can kind of see it. I think anything less, it's just too disruptive. So do you have any strategies for that when it comes to an organization that you want to help and you want to really encourage them, even implore them to, hey, this is going to take a minute? Is there anything that you tend to kind of bring up or look for or hear that shows you that that's going to be possible?
Yeah, yeah, no, that's a great point too, Greg, is that we're all in this because we like helping organizations, and there is a great sense of satisfaction to see an organization move from maybe more proactive or more reactive to proactive. And at the end of the day, when you can sit back and see it, there's nothing like it. It is really a fantastic thing. Everybody that I've worked with that's been really good reliability consultants, that's what they really are passionate about and love, to see is to see potential improvements that come throughout the process. You had asked about where is the general starting point for some of these, activities. Well, it comes, I think the starting point, and one thing that you and I had spoken about in Greenville was education,
Hmm.
right? And helping folks to understand that there is a better way. This is not the way that most organizations operate. That, if you go through and making it believable, right? And getting around the bullshit, because the way we kicked it off the conversation was talking about the bullshit, right? And there's a lot of it that's out there, but having somebody you trust and somebody that you know can come in and has the history and the background of these what they call cultural transformation projects, right? Because it's not only the process side, because you can go in there and re-engineer processes all day long, but at the end of the day, it's the people. And do the people understand what's in it for them?
Mm.
And how is my coming to this job for 8 hours making an impact on the business and the operations at the end of the day? So it's helping them to understand that. So generally starting off with education. Um, and then if that works and you get a good collective group, and this is the whole change management side of things, right? The touchy feely stuff versus the engineering stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you come in, you get them excited, and they're like, yeah, we need to do this. We need to do this here. This is great. And this is from the shop floor all the way. This is not the executives telling everybody. Everybody's understanding and they're excited about it and they want to take the next steps. And then you come in and maybe conduct an assessment, maybe have a third party outside organization come in and tell you areas that you're doing well in and areas that could be improved to move towards a goal. Once that assessment takes place, then, really putting a business case around that. Okay, well, if we do this much during this time frame and it costs us this much, and maybe new software packages, maybe having a third party come in and help us to coach us along the way, so our people are actually taking ownership of the new processes and advancing that. Then the business case is made and putting together a master plan to say, okay, and this is a journey. It's not a race. So at
Yeah.
the end of the day, we're all working for the common cause, but we can't say within 6 months this plant's going to be reliable. You can't say that. You can't say that. You can be better at things and you can do improvement things, but it's creating, like you said, Greg, that culture of continuous improvement, right? That everybody feels a sense of ownership in the company and the profitability of the company, that they're willing to come in and put in the efforts in a day-to-day operation. And that kind of brings you to the third phase, which is just the deployment and having, some coaching along the way from some industry experts to come in and do that. So really the way I look at it is, a phased approach of educating folks, getting them excited about it, assessing your organization of where that could be, helpful, but then the implementation phase of getting out there and getting the people within the plan, not the consultants, but the people to go out and do it for you.
Yeah, because that's really what it is, right? Everything goes from the whiteboard and the weekly meetings, all the different practice. By the way, I love those quick meetings. We got to witness one. I love the way it was handled. I love the way it rolled out. I love the way it translated as we were out watching it happen. That
Yeah.
is stuff that people. That's the potential that you're sleeping on or that you're desiring and wanting for your organization and your teams. That was good stuff. And again, I don't want to give away any of that secret sauce, so we'll keep that kind of general like that. But
Well, it was interesting because the company that we were visiting, and I won't name any names,
yeah,
we got to sit through their maintenance meeting that morning, their maintenance and reliability meeting that morning. Uh, awesome leadership. Very, I think that the group that we were with was acknowledging each other's proactive activities, and were very positive. And that's just when you go in and you see that sort of thing, you know that a company has invested in their people, has training options available for them to help in their professional growth, is not afraid of other organizations, because there's plenty of organizations in the automotive industry up there in Greenville, South Carolina, that could come in and pluck those fine folks that were in that meeting that we were in, Greg. So I agree as well too. It's a magical thing to see that, working in person, and to really know that there are companies out there that do it. And if you feel like you're in the reactive mode and you maybe work for a company like that, I would definitely challenge you to go see one of those organizations. And if you got a friend or a colleague that's in the area and they work for one of those companies that, has got it down,
ask
go
them
over
if you
there and
can
have
go
a
check it
plant
out.
tour. They'll be happy. They're happy to show it off usually.
The real deal people are, unless there's some legit reasons behind why they can't or that they wouldn't. It's not because they want to keep it a secret. It's because they might have to, right? But
Yeah.
what was also cool about this, and the CMS is just a part of this. It's a part of this. It's really about the people, the leadership, and how all those people on that entire team felt extremely comfortable speaking freely, professionally, but freely about challenges that they have and ideas that they're bringing as to how they could solve those challenges, maybe bringing up what they need. That's what we're really after. So you can almost take software and throw it out the window. And we're going to keep coming back to that over and over and over again, because those are the tools that we need to use. And when people are of the right mindset, of the right confidence level, they're far less interested in blame game. They're more interested in progress as a unit. Sure, individual performance is awesome, but how does that help everybody on the right, on the left, etc.? That's the really good stuff that I love talking about. Maintenance management in and of itself at any level, even if it's a crazy, your hair's on fire environment where all kinds of bad stuff is happening, it always comes down to the people and the process. And then, of course, we can start layering in all the buzzy stuff and the cobots and the this and the sensors that, do the over the shoulder boulder holder. I love saying that, man. It's my favorite. I like saying hogwash too. I mean, it's a true thing with all this technology, but it's not what it seems. It's not a magic silver bullet. Question for you. When it comes to all of industry, it's going to be really hard to probably pick one, but do you have either a favorite industry where you've worked and helped, or maybe more recently? So whether it's one you were once fond of, or maybe something that's happening now where it's like, man, I love that industry, or this was really cool because, and I'm thinking, like oil and gas, oil rigs, anything like that you could share that's like a favorite for you right now or back then?
Man, a favorite for me throughout the years, and I've never had that question posed, Greg, is food and food processing. And I've never had that question posed to me, but that's one that I've had a tremendous amount of experience in. And it's one that you could really measure efficiencies within. So if a food company is doing it right, they are providing that the reliability programs they have in place are providing a very easy to quantify uh, payback to the organization. And so, with that being said, I think that my experience and the ones that I've seen the most results in, as far as like scrap coming off of machines and efficiencies. And I've been in, Tyson chicken plants, ConAgra beef processing plants, Swanson frozen food plants, um, a number of organizations that I've helped, from a consulting standpoint, not just from a sales standpoint, right? But, those are the ones that I truly understand. Pharma is a great one as well, too. Pharmaceutical companies, they're staffed up. I mean, they have true internal consulting teams that, are really impactful. So they know the importance of reliability, so much so that they have a corporate consulting team that will help them to go out and deploy some of these best practices at their sites. If they need some help here, like need some training there, or need, they're not reaching to outside organizations. They're doing a lot of it in house. They're more focused on regulatory compliance, right? So they're very much on the risk side of things. So if they're
Mm,
not getting fined or having high risks, the pharma companies are very happy. But if you want to see some good stuff, go to their sites. Most of their organizations are, because they're such a clean environment. So it's almost like
typically,
what you
typically.
said, Greg, about it not being rocket science a lot of times is it's not rocket science. It's just being nice. It's being well organized, efficient, those types of things all kind of combine into it. And so I've heard, George Williams, my boss, talk about it a couple of times that, 5S isn't a process improvement technique. It's a technique to see if you have the discipline to have a program where you're hanging up your tools, where they are, you know. So if you think of it in terms of that, that makes a lot of sense because a clean house is usually an efficient house, right?
That's well, and it's interesting you brought that up because a lot of times there's some debate, maybe a lot, I don't know, about the idea between reliability and safety. Are they really linked together? Could you have a reliable plant that is not safe? There's strong evidence that you could. However, I think more often they kind of work hand in hand. And then when you talk about the cleanliness, I'm always out here, maybe not on the podcast, but I'm a proponent of that aspect of facilities, maintenance operations, manufacturing environments, or otherwise. I mean, all of them that if they are really, really clean, they're naturally going to be safer. They're going to be a more positive environment. You don't have as much distraction. There's less risk. And then when you talk about pharma, food, and several other environments where things get made, those contaminants being less likely to occur gives you out of the gate kind of an advantage, whether you have software or not, or technology or not. And that's a people thing. And then you mentioned how some of these organizations have their own internal reliability consulting team. That's really good because they can really stay on top of everything, not to crack on everybody, but to see the anomalies or the clues that something's about to change, and they can intervene. I also think when companies are kind of caught between a rock and a hard place where they can't have their own internal reliability consultant that's on staff, they should consider consultants, but they gotta find the people with the integrity. So I'm leading us into a story. There's this kind of story I heard recently, and we've heard it countless times, where someone comes into an environment, they see some problems, and they start to try to adapt that environment to what they know really, really well versus understanding what actually works for the business, what that business needs, and even, going so far as to say, we need to do it that way because that works for you. So we're going to make a slight adjustment. How common is that happening environment by environment? Like, is it really true that no two organizations are going to be the same when it comes to how they approach things like ISO 55000 or other things as it relates to, say, compliance? The rules are the rules, but how we deploy software, track and manage things, and communicate things, there's going to be these variances. How common is it? And have you also seen and heard stories where people are trying to change an entire organization to meet what they're selling rather than understanding the organization?
That's a good one, Greg. I think that if you're looking at technology, there is a deviation, right? In types of technologies that are out there, how mature the technology is, if they've really mastered that technology. From a process side of things, and I get it, I hear it all the time that, hey, we're much different in the oil and gas industry, or hey, we're much different in the pharmaceutical industry. We need somebody who can come in and knows these assets and knows the finer points of these assets. And what I think you'll find if you step back is that a lot of the assets across these industries is pretty common. It's pretty common to find a pump, a boiler, a compressor, these types of assets in a common manufacturing environment, right?
Mm-hmm.
Some may deviate a little bit, but for the most part, the way that you manage maintenance on these specific assets is not much different from industry to industry. Now, that's looking at very asset focused reliability, right? If you look at operational driven reliability, yes, it's very different. That, a potato chip manufacturer would be much different than, having to go into a clean room and look at insulin in a pharma facility, right? Both, and the reason I like both, Greg, and I really didn't kind of hit on this, is that regardless, everybody eats and everybody needs drugs to stay well. So
One way or
that's
another.
that's kind of why I like both industries. They're very recession proof. They're not going to dip down major, they're going to stay fairly consistent within both. But that also awards them the opportunity to run out there and go get the shiny new things, right? So the new predictive maintenance, the new thermography, or the new
AI
types of AI stuff that's out there. They can test it. They have the money to go out there and test these types of things. But again, if they're not looking at how mature their organization is to move forward with these technologies, I think it's very difficult to stabilize and utilize that data again for meaningful results. I don't think that, and George said something very impactful. And this is one of the reasons I've joined ReliabilityX, is because when I would meet with George, we'd go outside, and you saw Greg, I'm still like a smoker, which I'm trying not to be, right? And George Williams is as well. But it gave me some good quality time with him throughout the years. And I remember at one of our conferences, we were out and smoking a cig down in Florida, and you'd walk inside the exhibit hall, and there was like infrared, machine learning, motor. You could see the inside a motor and the brushes and everything. And George is just out there scratching his head. He said, "Damn, Dan, all these fancy tools in there." He said, "I just want somebody to write a good job plan for me. I just want somebody to write a good job plan for me." And it really resonated. I was like, "Yeah, George, you're right." Sometimes it does, Greg. It boils down to the fundamentals and making sure that you're addressing the fundamentals before diving into that next buzzword or that next technology that's out there, right?
Yeah, and we mean this in the most respectful way, and I think I want to be a resource for people to come to and maybe hear some things that get you thinking. And yeah, I come off pretty harsh on some of that stuff, but I mean well. I know that you mean well, and
yeah,
I think this is a good wrap up point, man. I really appreciate you being on CMMS Radio with me again. We've got an episode sitting in the can from Greenville that we're going to be working on. That's a cool one too. So, Dan the Man Anderson, ReliabilityX, thank you for being on CMMS Radio.
Thank you, Greg. My pleasure.
Did you find this episode helpful? Please send us some feedback, suggest a topic, or ask a question. Reach out to CMMS Radio if you need a co-pilot on your CMMS project. Visit cmmsradio.com and use the What's on Your Mind link. Thank you for tuning in to CMMS Radio, your resource for all things CMMS, from selection to implementation, to help you make better choices, learn from industry experts, and have a successful CMMS journey.